few, I guess, guests, public, on the meeting tonight. Nancy Richardson from the Charlotte News. You'll see the CC is Colin from RETN. Karina Hussey, right, from CVSD, and well, Greg Marino. He's not really public. He's part family, part public, I guess. But those are the only ones that I have so far that outside of the board and the administration. Before we get into the full meeting tonight and go through adjustments to the agenda, I wonder if you guys would just let me take a few minutes. I'm going to try and do this right. If I can. I just wanted to take a few minutes and acknowledge the passing a week ago of Monica Smith, who was the principal at Charlotte for 19 years. She was the principal of my kids, and she was the principal when I first started on the board there. And she passed away very suddenly. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts. I thought it was very touching, the comments that people had written about Monica after they found out that she had died. And I took 4, and I just want to read them into the record, just acknowledge who Monica was, because I think these quotes speak volumes about who she was as a person and an administrator. The first quote is from a student who said, "Monica was the reason I got into education in the first place. I always knew she believed in me." The second quote came from a faculty member at CCS who said, "She was a wise and enthusiastic leader who believed that education started with doing what was best for each child in our district." A parent wrote, "She truly believed in every single kid. You don't forget that kind of kindness and that smile." And finally, from a board member who was on the board when I was not on the board, said, "Monica was incredibly generous with her time, even when she didn't have any to spare. We didn't always agree on everything, but it was okay because her decisions were always made with the best interest of her students in mind. This was gospel. What will stay with me forever is the way she treated my kids and all kids with abundant love and respect." So on that note, we should be having a party instead of a meeting, because that was Monica's tagline. Why have a meeting when you could have a party? But I just want to say she left a mark on a lot of people, and just acknowledge her passing. So thank you for letting me share that tonight. Okay. There are a few adjustments to the agenda. We are going to add to the joint fiscal office presentation just a very brief discussion on the impact of that on the CVS budget work. We're going to pull 2 items out of the consent agenda. The first one is the CVS D School Calendar for 2021. And the second one are the personnel items. That was all of the adjustments to the agenda that I had. Did anyone else have an adjustment to the agenda? Any adjustments to the agenda? Okay, we're gonna try something again different tonight. When we do have to take action and take a vote on it, I'm going to unmute everyone, and we'll do ayes and nays. And unless if it's not unanimous, then we will go through the roll call. Otherwise, we should be okay with the ayes and nays. And don't forget that there is an executive session at the end that there is a different link to. So we'll end this. We'll take a motion to enter executive session, end this meeting, and then start the second Zoom meeting. Okay, I think that's all. Does anyone have anything to add? We're ready to move on to audience and communications. No? Seeing none, hearing none? 4.0 reports to the board, COLT report. Elaine? You're muted.
Okay, I thought you unmuted us because I was going to say I'll be calling on different COLT members so they can each unmute themselves, right? Okay, that's much better anyways.
That's too much work.
Yeah. Okay, so we tried to do a COLT report that was kind of comprehensive in looking at the work that each one of us is doing so that you'd get a sense of what's happening everywhere. So I am going to call on each person to just kind of do a highlight of the things that we think are newsworthy for you guys. And I'm going to start with Megan, and maybe Megan, you can speak a little bit about early education and what's going on with that.
Sure, thanks. I talked about this a little bit in the COLT report. I think what I would want the board to know is, as you know, we partner with about 47 early learning programs, so community-based pre-K programs, and that serves almost 400 students in CVSD. These are students that don't receive their services here or their education here. And during the school closure, pretty late actually, about a week and a half ago, we received guidance from the agency that we would be responsible for providing remote learning to those students. So you can imagine that was a pretty challenging news to get. That's a lot of additional students to serve. And so I just want to highlight that our early ed director, Shelley Henson, and particularly Victoria Francis, who is a Williston early education outreach coordinator, worked together and in very, very short order launched a remote learning platform that is web ready and was sent out to those 400 families on Monday. So they did really great work with a really challenging ask of the agency.
I would just add that when we got that guidance, which I think we got on a Friday afternoon, I forwarded it to Megan and to Shelley Henson and said, you guys don't need to think about this weekend. Let's plan a meeting for Monday morning and figure out what we can do, because it was clear it was a huge, huge ask. And by Sunday night, I'd gotten an email from Shelley Henson saying, we're all set to go. We've done this. Meanwhile, in the field, we were all ready to like push back and say, how can we possibly do this? How can we support kids that we've never had any interaction with? We haven't worked with these parents. We haven't worked with the kids. And over a weekend, you know, two heroes stepped up to the plate and made it work for all of our families. So thank you, Megan, for sharing that. Mark, you have some kudos yourself you want to give to the people that work in your department.
Yeah, my part of the COLT report is really just a kudos to my staff. And it is the background of the school system that is making things go that doesn't get seen very often. But Cheryl and Kelly and Roseanne and Betsy are doing what is a paper intensive process and figuring out how to do that by going to the office more than a lot of people are, by figuring things out at home. For instance, we had a contractual obligation to get letters of intent out to all of our teachers over the past couple of weeks, which is usually a fairly simple process when everybody's at their schools. But when everybody's at home, it involved mailing and getting them back and scanning them, and it made it a bigger haul. Anyway, they are supporting our employees throughout the entire district, making sure that they're getting paid, that their benefits are continuing uninterrupted, and with the current situation, helping them through some sticky situations in their benefits and their healthcare and that sort of thing. And I just wanted to make sure that they were recognized, as well as the teachers who are out there every day, and our food service folks and our custodians. That's all.
Thanks, Mark. Jean, I know many of the board members are interested in what's happening now with the bond, right? Now that we're in this situation. So Jean did a little bit of an update in the Colt report, and maybe you want to speak a little bit to that, Jean?
What I put in the Colt report was sort of a little description of the bond market really not being something we could access now, if whether we wanted to or not. So there's probably a discussion about timing of the bond, given the JFO news that we're going to talk about in a bit, but whether we wanted to or not, it's not in the cards for this summer. That's okay. You can think about the bond that was in two pieces. One was the $4.5 million for the Charlotte school upgrade. That work was not going to be done this summer anyway. It was scheduled for next summer, so we can easily wait until the winter bond pool for that. So we have time to think about the implications on that one. The other $1.5 million. So Kurt Prue, my current property services manager, and Chris Giard, will be the property service manager on July 1st when Kurt's retired. They sat down and looked at the projects that were in that $1.5 million piece of the bond, and they looked at the projects that were in the slated to be paid for out of the construction fund, which is about $800,000 of cash that we have on hand for construction projects. And they reassessed the two of them. They prioritized the projects, and they figure they can take the most urgent projects out of the $1.5 million and swap them out with the ones that were in the construction fund. So we can get the most urgent projects done this summer with money we have on hand. And then the rest of them will have to wait until the bond decision. So right now I would say that we have the most urgent projects covered for this summer, and we will have to have discussions about the timing of the bond, given changes in the bond market over the next 6 months.
Thanks, Jean.
Can I hold you just a second, Elaine? I think Jocelyn had a question, and then Russ had a question.
Okay, Jocelyn?
Thank you. I just had a question for Megan. Megan, I think it is absolutely incredible what your team was able to do for the Act 166 kiddos. I was just wondering, I know that I read in the Colt report that the website or the web page would be live, I think yesterday, and that it would be communicated to families. I just wondered if we as a district were communicating directly to parents, or if we were depending on the programs that we're partnering with to communicate to them. That was just, it seemed like a unique situation, so I just wondered.
It is unique for sure, and it's a great question. We actually emailed directly to the parents because a lot of these programs are closed right now. Some of them are open, providing essential childcare, but many of them aren't. So we have a list of our registered students because of the registration process. So we direct emailed to those families, and then the link is now posted on our website. So as soon as it went live, we also posted it. But yep, that's what we did.
Awesome. That's just what I was thinking about. I know that I've heard from a lot of people that they're getting nothing from their childcare preschool facilities. So just wondered. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Russ?
Yeah. So, Jean, leaving aside the discussion of whether the bond markets were behaving normally, it would be a good idea to float one right now. What does the vote give us the ability to do? Does it expire at some point if we haven't floated the bond issue for this purpose within a certain period of time, or is it kind of open-ended? And I'm asking this because at some point we're going to need to have that conversation about moving forward and what kind of time frame.
I will definitely have that for you the next time, Russ. I know that we're not in danger in the next year, that there could be an expiration beyond that. I just checked. At this point, I just checked to make sure that the next summer bond pool would be acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
So thanks, Jean. Another area that I know many board members are interested in is our contingency planning for what comes next. Jeff's done a little bit of thinking about that. He included some of that in the Colt report. And could you speak a little bit more about that, Jeff?
Sure, thank you. I wanted to just highlight a couple of things. One is that, remote learning is now entering or in its second week. So in addition to designing and implementing, revising, based on all of the learning that we're doing, we are also facing some really formidable challenges around contingency planning, given some of the things that we're hearing about and some of the things that we're so uncertain about. It's not just the more immediate things like graduation ceremonies and summer programming, but also twice now in the last 2 weeks, Dan French has told Elaine and other superintendents in meetings, don't expect to go back in the fall in the same way that we were doing school before this, and that there will probably be a number of structures that we'll need to have in place. And so we're starting to look at things like staggered schedules and hybrid models between remote and in-person, grade span specific plans. We're just barely beginning that because we don't want to get too deep into something that we don't have enough clarity around, but we also don't want to be flat-footed. You know, this is an opportunity to make sure that we understand all the landscape, so that when we do get that clarity, we can be a little more planful than we were able to be this last time.
Thanks, Jeff. You kind of faded out there at the very end,
Oh,
but I think we got the gist of what you were saying. So, I mean, it really is important for us to be thinking ahead, but not too far, right? We don't know what it's going to be. Dan has hinted the last 2 weeks, the superintendents meet with Dan every Thursday for an hour, and he, you know, kind of goes over the things that he knows about, but he's very clear to say this is not guidance. I am just sharing with you what I'm hearing and what we're talking about and what we're thinking. But 2 weeks in a row, he has alerted us that we should not be expecting school to look in September the way it did last September. And so that gets everybody's gears going. And he's promised more guidance by May 8th, both around end of year celebrations and maybe into a little bit in the future. So we have to wait, because once we get the guidance, we're going to get told how it's going to be. It's not like every single supervisory district gets to say, oh, well, for us, we'll do it this way. And one of the key points that he made is that whole triangulation between school and childcare and opening up the economy. And those two things are inexorably connected. And as we move on one, we're going to be moving on the other. So we're going to have to figure that out. But I really appreciate that Jeff has done quite a bit of heavy lifting at the front end of this, thinking out a little bit further than I would have, honestly, around like we're kind of at the nexus here. And we know that like we could end up, you know, the vector is here, we could end up any place. And he started thinking about like, well, what does it look like if we end up in this place or this place or this place, just to start framing that. Jocelyn, I saw you had a question, I think.
I think actually Angela's hand was first and then
Okay.
Jocelyn.
Sorry, Angela, should have seen you looking right at you.
It's okay. I did the blue hand, not the real hand.
Yeah.
I was just curious if I don't know what physical like plant changes are part of that conversation as well. If we're in the event of incorporating social distancing in the buildings, if that's part of the conversation you're having.
Yeah. So Jeff's thinking about that for sure, but I think it's a little premature to go there because I don't know what the guidance is going to be, but he is thinking about that. He is thinking, honestly, he's thought way down the path. Jeff, do you want to say a little bit about that, or?
Just keeping an eye on other countries that are doing the re-emergence into education. Denmark has started, for instance. I've read a few articles about what they're doing. They are keeping 6 feet, which means you can't have a full classroom in there. They're staggering schedules or they're alternating days. You know, there are a few models out there that we're floating around, again, without really a lot of guidance yet. But I don't think there's any doubt that we'll have to reconstruct our spaces to some degree.
Yeah, one of the things that Dan says, and he said this twice now, he says, nobody wants the situation where we are all, you know, in remote learning, and then we're all back, and then we're all back to remote learning. We need to find a through line that's going to connect all these parts so that this can make sense for people, right? So that's the business that Jeff's about, and trying to learn from everyone and use his own creative, innovative thinking about how it can work for us.
I would,
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
ahead.
I was gonna say Jocelyn, but go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to add that I know we've got the calendar to talk about, but that calendar we're asking you to approve, we're very aware may change quite a bit time school starts.
Jocelyn?
I just wondered if there's been any conversation about if we have any sense of when the end of school will be happening this school year. If we're still
good.
planning on sort of mid-June or what sort of coming down the pipe about that.
Okay, well, there's two parts to that, right? One part is what's the last day of remote learning for students?
Mhm.
June 12th. That's what we're recommending to you, the board. That's the 175th day. We're recommending it, but you don't really have a lot of choice because by statute, we need 175 days. And the agency has been generous in counting all of our days, right? Including the days that Williston and Shelburne were shut down in the early days of COVID, right? So we have every reason to believe that they're going to waive those days. So June 12th is a real day, last day for students. And then we have 3 additional days for teachers just contractually. So that's also in the consent agenda. That's our recommendation for the end of this year. The second question that I thought you were asking was around what the end of the year might look like and might we have, is that where you were going?
I mean,
Yeah.
that would have been my next part of my question. but-
So stay tuned because that one we do know from Dan that we will hear explicit guidance May 8th.
Okay.
So
Awesome. Thank
next
you.
Friday, he's going to tell us what that capital G guidance is around that. And
Perfect.
that's for
Thank you.
graduation and all of it.
I have been listening to every press conference Monday, Wednesday, Friday, listening specifically for
Yeah.
anything Dan French says.
So Dan meets with the superintendents on Thursdays, just the superintendents. And that's why he says this isn't guidance. It's not even small g guidance. He tells us that at the front end of it. But we definitely get a window into like what they're talking about, what they're thinking about. And he definitely lets us know ahead of time, like he drops hints about things that we ought to be thinking about. But he has been very specific that on May 8th, we will hear about end of year celebrations and what that might
Okay.
look like.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jeff?
Yes, I just had one further thought about the initial planning that's going on regarding the fall, and that is that it feels like in addition to everyone who's involved in those decisions, that I also am wondering about parents and if there will be an X number of parents who do not feel comfortable in sending their children to school should school reconvene in our buildings. And so I have no doubt that you've been thinking about that also. I don't know if there's any plan maybe later in the summer to be surveying parents about this aspect, but I'm just thinking about the number of parents we heard from before school closed, asking that school be closed. And so I just think about that as another factor moving into the new school year in terms of where our parents are going to be with this process.
Right. I mean, that's one of those paths that we have to
Right.
know is out there. It's a road we're going to have to take, and we'll wait because depending on what the guidance is, will determine what we can and can't do, right? Around that, but no, you're right. Yes, I see your hand.
Angela.
I've actually been wondering this. And I guess the only way when you say, I know the term used is guidance, but it's actually more than guidance, right?
Yeah.
it's
You will do this.
Right. So for instance, just as an example, if the guidance is you should have this many hours for K through 2 and this many hours for 3 through 5 and this many hours, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's guidance, but that's how they're determining whether there is attendance and that's how we get money. And you know what I mean? All of it is really connected. So, right.
Yeah,
It's guidance. That's why I called it capital G guidance. I don't know legally if we could just say, oh, well, never mind. We're just going to do it our way. I don't know. But yeah, it's more than just guidance.
Thanks.
Yes, Jean?
I'm going to take us off this topic. So I forgot something in my report though. So when we're
Okay,
ready.
we'll back up. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry. I have a little note here to tell. It's late breaking news, but I didn't put it on the agenda because it's late breaking news. But I just wanted the board to be aware that the lead testing that was mandated by the
Oh,
state has
right.
come back for 3 of our 5 schools. It is not nearly as good a news as we got in the spring when we did when we had the testing done as part of our routine maintenance. So you should not be surprised to see it coming out because it's public documents. There are multiple faucets in every school that are above the 4 parts per billion, which is the new state standard. It's really late breaking news. I promise I will get more information going forward. Almost all of the taps are below the 15 parts per billion, which was the standard until about 18 months ago. But they're above the standard now, and so they'll need remediation, which means that as of right now, all the taps that tested too high for lead have been taken apart, so they can't be used or taped off. We've got parts on order to replace them all, and a small upside to not having any children in the school is that they're not using the water there now. So the staff the minimal staff who are in know not to drink out of those faucets, and we're putting a plan in place to get them all corrected.
Jane, can you just clarify? You said we got results from 3 of the 5 schools, or that 3 out of 5 schools tested? Are we still waiting for results?
We're still waiting for results actually I should say 3 out of 6. We're still waiting for Williston and Shelburne.
Okay.
Charlotte, Heinsberg, and CVU. And they all had, more than a dozen taps, in case one of the schools even more than that, that tested in between those 2 parameters, but will be remediated. So I am not enough of a chemist to understand why the exact same test, done 6 months apart would come dramatically different. Well, I shouldn't say dramatically different. They were 3 parts per billion, and now they're 5 parts per billion. But that is, close to double. So you would say that would be fairly significant. But in any case, for whatever reason, the state results are what matter, and we'll get them fixed.
Thank you, Jean. I'm glad you remembered that. And finally, Bonnie, and I'm going to ask Bonnie to speak to the other hat that she wears half time, or 80%. She wears both hats 80% these days.
Thank you, Elaine. I am speaking right now on behalf of, digital learning and how this current situation has really provided us with an amazing opportunity to help teachers grow in ways that they may not have been prepared for or wanted to prioritize in the past. But there are teachers doing a wonderful job learning, growing, and we can throw out all the metaphors we've all used about how new this is and how this is not what teachers were trained to do, but they're doing a phenomenal job. And we are still using our request for tech process in that to assure that we're looking at student data privacy. As people may explore a few new tools, we're trying to help people focus on the tools that we've always had to use more effectively or make better use of all the features they offer. And I just also want to do a kudos to the digital learning leaders, the librarians, the teacher leaders in all the schools, and just how everybody's come together to support one another through this.
Thank you, Bonnie. Any other questions from the COLT report?
I don't have a question from the COLT report, but I did get a question. If a parent, and I know we've all seen the reports about everywhere how much distance learning, remote learning has changed family dynamics, has changed family life, has changed households. And if a person just says, you know what, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, my kids aren't going to go to school anymore, what is the process? I guess I'm saying for the rest of the school year, like we're done. Can they do that? What are the ramifications of doing that?
So we talked about that yesterday at COLT because we're anticipating that might happen. And so I have that on my Ask Dan French on Friday at the trustee meeting. What is the guidance on that? How do we do that? I guess it was at LEAD. It was at the LEAD meeting. It was one of the principals who brought that up. what do we do with that? What does that look like? So anyways, it's another
Okay.
stay tuned, but we have
Thank you.
thought about it.
Thanks. Okay, anything else on the COLT report? Kate and Elise, I know you guys didn't do a written report, but do you have anything that you would like to add from the student perspective? Elise, you're muted, hun. There you go.
I don't know if there's anything necessarily to add. I think again, the schedule is now, I think people are adjusting to the new schedule because we got a new schedule recently. So I think it's hard to report on things because there haven't been as many things to report on. But I think everyone's just adjusting, and there's still that disappointment, especially in terms of like prom and graduation. But I think at least the schedule and online learning for the high school has kind of fallen into more of a routine. So yeah.
The only thing I would add is the CVU class of 2020 does have an Instagram page, and we've been posting seniors post-graduation plans, whether that's to stay at CVU, continue on to higher education, go into the workforce, no matter what that is. So it's definitely fun to read if you want to check it out.
It's an Instagram page?
Yeah, it's very cute.
Excellent.
I also heard on the news tonight that they are going to do a massive national graduation for seniors across the country, and even like do shout outs to individual schools, and Oprah Winfrey is going to be the main speaker, and there's going to be a panoply of like high level people who are going to be part of it to just do what they can to make it special for you guys, because honestly, I don't think a day goes by that I don't think about the seniors and don't think about like, geez, this is just not fair, not right. But anyway, stay tuned. May 8th, we'll find out what we can do.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to 5.0 discussion matters.
Hey, Lynn, Lynn, I just want to check. Does Barbara have a question?
Barbara.
It says Emma Martin. I assume it's Barbara.
Is there a blue hand?
It's just in the chat.
Oh, you know what? There are so many participants. I don't even see the chat. I'm so sorry.
No,
Hold on.
I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Barbara.
All right. Yeah, no, I actually had two questions, and one was an ETA, when the lead repairs are likely to be completed. Do we have an ETA?
Definitely before anybody inhabits the buildings again in any kind of significant way.
That's good. And then the other question, and maybe it's kind of been answered, but do we also have some guidance or thinking on how different the school day might be? We may need to restructure the school day when we come back in the fall. Supposing we come back in the fall. So is that also out there? And maybe this is a Megan or Jeff question.
Actually, I'll take it. That's part of the contingency planning that Jeff is doing. And it includes everything. What does the schedule look like, both internally during the day if kids are there, and externally if kids aren't there, and which kids are there and which kids aren't? All of that, every bit of that is on the table. And we'll know more in the next few weeks, how, what the parameters are for that.
Okay, and the reason I asked that is because we all know that, kids coming back to school, things are going to be different for them. They will have probably small attentions to stay in class. Does that mean they have longer breaks or, things like that? But okay.
All of that is at play.
All right, thanks, great.
Yeah, you guys are all anticipating all the things that we are thinking about and talking about. And if you're Jeff, putting down on paper and organizing for further discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the benefits too is we're not doing this alone. There are 43 other states or 50 other states that are going to be in a similar situation. And, some of those may go to school year round. So we'll be able to learn from them if they go back before we do in
Mhm.
September. Okay, any other questions? I'm sorry, Barbara, I now have the chat up. I can see that. And Stephanie, can you just introduce yourself? Stephanie Dupraz.
Dupra.
Hi, yes, I'm a intensive para at Shelburne.
Oh, okay, thank you. I didn't recognize the name, so I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Okay, so we're now on to 5.0 discussion matters. 5.1 options for May retreat. So if you recall, we had gotten ourselves really organized, had a retreat date, had our topics for the retreat, and then the reality of having an 8-hour retreat over a Zoom meeting on a school day with kids at home just didn't seem like it was a plausible or beneficial experience for anyone. And so we talked a little bit, I think you saw in the COLT report, we talked a little bit about it at the executive committee meeting, some ideas of how we could address the 4 topics that we had identified. And just to refresh everyone, those 4 topics were benchmarks, the equity audit, the role of committees, and then I believe the 4th one was special education, wanting to look more into that. So there are a couple of ways that we could do this to deal just with those 4 topics. And one of those would be to set up individual meeting times to do each topic. So we would do the equity audit in one 2-hour chunk. We would do the benchmarks in another 2-hour chunk, and kind of work with those that way. I'm gonna tag Jeff Martin, because he actually had an idea that we've been throwing around, which I think might help. It might help address the role of the committees in a different way, in a different form. So Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about what you were thinking as well?
So I think we have a couple of areas to think about, and one connects directly to what Lynn just said, which is how do we best figure out the logistics of how we can meet in an efficient way where we can get work done, but that isn't so overtaxing or unrealistic that we can't really manage it. So there is that question of starting with our May retreat, how do we want to manage the time for that? And do we want to break that up by topic, as Lynn has just identified? And then, in addition to the May retreat, this came up first, I believe, during the Saturday emergency meeting that we had as a board, right as school was about to close, where I began to wonder, and I know that others have joined with me in this question, whether or not we need to find additional time this summer to be reviewing and debriefing the March through June COVID period, and to be looking at some things such as looking at the existing policy that we have right now, our crisis prevention and response policy, which identifies some roles and responsibilities for administration and staff and students, but does not speak to the responsibilities of the board. And also to really define our board role, to be clear about what our board role is, and to look at how we might optimize our communications and our board relations, particularly during times of crisis such as what we are in right now. So There was a question of really having a second retreat of some kind where we would look back over all that has taken place from a board perspective, review what has worked and what hasn't worked, what policy changes, if any, do we need to charge our policy committee with, what input can we give to them, and other ideas that folks might be coming up with. These are just very much draft thoughts with nothing cast in stone. And then the second, the other idea is as we move through the summer and we're beginning to approach the school year, would it be in our best interest to meet once again in some kind of retreat form to both seek a review of what the current implications in that time, if we were meeting, for example, in August, what the current implications of COVID is on our district, and looking at things like education and finance and operations, et cetera, to be getting a full update on all the information that our administration has collected over the summer months, and helping us as we begin to plan for the fall, not only looking at budgetary implications, but other things that fall within our roles. So we're really looking at this idea of, and I know this can feel overwhelming, but of 3 separate retreats. The first, again, being what we've already planned. The second, a look back over what has happened and how can we improve the way in which we function. And the third, to really absorb the information that's been collected over the summer and plan for the fall. So it just seems like this might be a good time to begin discussion about these ideas and our work over the next several months.
And my hope would be that the first retreat, the topics that make up the first retreat would be individual sessions. I would really hope that we call them Retreat 2.0 and Retreat 3.0 would be at a time when we could all be together, even if we're in the multi-purpose room 6 feet apart. But again, we'll cross that bridge. But for right now, I guess we're looking for some input first on Retreat 1.0, that idea of breaking out the topics into separate nights, and then Retreat 2.0, looking at the board's role during COVID and how we can improve upon what has happened. And then Retreat 3.0, which is getting us ready for the, getting us all back up to speed and ready to go for the fall. So I see Jocelyn.
I'm getting really good about raising my blue hand. I just want to say thank you, Jeff and Lynn. You guys said it better than anything I could have suggested. I really love the plan of a 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Jeff, what you were just talking about, I think is just totally spot on for what I think makes sense for what we need to talk about and the work that we need to do. I would just ask if we're going to split it up, if there's any way to do it after 4 o'clock. That would be ideal. It's really difficult right now to be, keeping all the plates spinning during the school day. And I'm sure that that is probably true for our amazing Colt staff that are also working tirelessly, probably during the day, at night, and on the weekends. But Jeff, I really just love exactly everything that you were just talking about. I think what we had determined for our retreat is still very important. However, being able to sort of have a retrospect look back and really dissect sort of what did well, what didn't do well, sort of like, really get into the meat of everything, and then trying to figure out if, heaven forbid, this happens again or whatever, what our response can look like or what our response will look like, because business probably is not going to be as usual moving forward, how in some degree, even with, Dan French making comments about the fall probably won't look like the fall from last year. So who knows if our board meetings will look the same as they did in September and October. So I would almost suggest that maybe we could even have our Tuesday night meetings twice a month through the months of July and August, or through June, or I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I'm happy to meet whenever we have to.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Colleen?
Thank you. So I'm unclear about this discussion topic. Lynn, are you asking for board perspective on different ideas? Is this a brainstorming session? Or, I mean, having been part of a couple other conversations, it seems, I'm unclear if you and Jeff had another meeting and set up the 1, 2, 3, which, you know, we had sort of talked about those different ideas. And we said, let's bring everything to the board. So I'm just wondering now, is it open up to the full board? Looking for what works for people? Because we talked about some things such as, you know, for people with young families, that long meetings are very difficult, or time of day. So those things that are not working for board members now, just because of different family obligations. So I'm just trying to clarify the protocol right now for this particular discussion topic.
Yeah, just trying to get a sense if people are buying into taking our big retreat and retreat 1.0 and breaking it into smaller pieces. That's, to me, that is the priority right now. But I would just like to get some feedback, you know, to Jocelyn's point about doing a retreat 2.0 and a retreat 3.0, things that if COVID had come along, we may not have thought about, but given the emergence of COVID, I think it's pointed out things that as a board, it would be beneficial for us to address. And I would just like to get, I don't think Jeff and I are alone in that, in those feelings, but I would just like to get some input.
Before I mute myself again, I would just offer that the committee structure that we have, I think, could also serve as a venue for some of these discussions. And I'm thinking, for example, the indicators committee, that perhaps the work of the indicators committee is really, what are the types of pieces of information, pieces of data that the board is looking for when there's something like this. And, you know, I'm just offering that as an example. You know, perhaps that's another way to look at it. And you know, one of the things we had talked about were shorter meetings, 60 to 90 minutes, and the spacing of them when they happen, whatever. And the timing, of course, it's got to be work for everybody, but definitely no 4-hour meeting. Nobody wants to do that. It's really unproductive. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure that if others had other ideas, this is probably a good time to bring it up.
Yep.
Thank you.
Brendan?
I think this is a pretty large project to figure out how to make this work, and probably, you know, we can use multiple board meetings to do it. What's everybody's thoughts about setting up an ad hoc committee to develop the retreat of the board?
Are you talking about retreat 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0?
Well, so, you know, for me, I've been sitting in these meetings and I'm confused on what's 1.0, 2.0, and 3. So maybe if we have, you know, everybody, like, I have strong opinions that may not align with somebody else's opinions, but maybe if we have a committee that is working on this, you know, they take the lead, they take, you know, they create the recommendation, you know, and we move forward with that. You know, for me, I think we need to keep the good work that we're going, but we're working in a new environment. How are we going to do that? And I don't think it's something we can answer in a half an hour, 45-minute conversation.
Okay. Any other input? Thoughts?
I'll say I'm excited by the prospect of having these multiple conversations and gaining, you know, a lot of clarity around what has happened, what may happen, what should happen. And I like the idea of breaking it up, trying to do that in a way that makes sense, kind of maybe topic wise, or, almost chronologically, though I think that's sort of how you suggested it, Lynn. And I'm happy to be available for pretty much whatever is needed, whether whether it, as Jocelyn mentioned, it's still 2 times a month, or if it needs to be more than that to get it all in before the decisions really need to be made, to do the planning part before the deciding part. I'm in.
Would it be helpful maybe if Jeff and I and Elaine put together a work plan from now through the beginning of the year that would incorporate retreat 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, put it all down so that everybody what we're thinking?
Can I just offer something? I'm wondering if we could maybe do that towards the end of the meeting, because I know there are a couple other topics coming up tonight that are going to require, or there's the option for committee work. And, for example, VSBA resolution, that could be a committee, or there's policy work, that's a committee, or whatever. But there are a number of different functions that the board is already working on. So I don't want to lose all of that. So I'm just wondering if maybe we could revisit this before we leave tonight.
Sure.
And to your point, Colleen, I think it speaks to the ongoing question that has been before us many times, which is being as clear as we can be about what is board work and what is committee work. Mm-hmm. And and what are those things that not only do we want committees to be addressing, but that the full board needs to charge committees with tackling. It feels like some of this could certainly be done in our regular board meeting. It also feels like, just as we step back and look in a sort of overarching way of all that has taken place over the last few months and all that we anticipate coming up, it seems like not only do we have the challenge of figuring out what are the issues, what is the content of things that we really need to be addressing, in addition to what we would normally be addressing, and it feels like there are a lot of things potentially, but also the puzzling aspect of how do we, what's the time, how do we do this how do we break this up and do this in a timely fashion so that we can, and as Jocelyn and Angela are speaking to the idea of more frequent meetings, and you've done that as well, Colleen. I think that so it feels to me that there are these two topics that if we could obtain some consensus this evening, it might be helpful going forward. One, does the board feel that we need these 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 opportunities to address a number of subjects? And second, content. And then sort of building on what Brendan and Lynn were saying, I do wonder about a draft of some content ideas for each of those retreat, or particularly 2.0 and 3.0 for those two retreats, and sending that out to the board and then getting input back from everyone as to additional ideas or alterations or changes or whatever that might look like. But it seems like some of that work maybe could be done with a draft document as a springboard, and then communication through some email and input, and then coming back. And I know we have to watch the way in which we manage that process, because we we can't be decision making, but we could be bringing something back to our next board meeting that might be more of a concrete proposal.
I'm taking silence as a, yeah, that's a great idea. Yes? Yes? Okay. We will then work on that and bring it back. Actually, maybe we'll try and have it for the committee meeting so that everybody can take it into their individual committees. And then, I mean, I think that'll be a start. I feel like we're going to run out of time. If we're going to do 4 separate meetings to address just our 4 topics, in addition to committee meetings, in addition to board meetings, and have this all done by June, it's a time crunch. So I think it'll be helpful to kind of maybe plot it all out and see how it all can happen, and then bring a realistic plan back to the board. I just want to make sure that we're not doing that. We're doing this with everyone's awareness that this is kind of how we're going to handle the retreat, this retreat 1.0 this year.
Lynn, you mean that by handle it, do you mean breaking it up?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. In case anyone was planning for their long Zoom.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Darn
well,
you.
We're going to all need lumbar supports to do that. Okay. Hearing no dissent, or seeing no dissent, we'll move on to 5.2, CVSD resolution for VSBA. Colleen, I'm going to ask you if you would just kind of explain this whole process, and then we can talk about whether there's a need to do this or a desire to do this for our board.
Okay, this can be rather quick. Some of board members might recall that there's a process for the VSBA organization to invite resolutions from individual boards from around the state. The VSBA Board of Directors has a resolutions committee that goes through all the suggestions that come in and then puts together a slate of resolutions that are presented to the assembly at the October annual meeting to other board members, where those resolutions are voted on. If the resolutions are approved, they're typically related to some sort of legislative action that's being requested by the VSBA as a whole. And then that gives directive to the executive director of the VSBA to channel their work towards advocating, typically in Montpelier. Typically, that's what happens. And so we're at a point, and this is every year, there's an invite for resolution proposals. We have not done that in a few years. I don't recall any proposals coming, but I could just be totally forgetting it. But I think it's been a few years since our board had a resolution proposal that we put forward to the VSBA Board of Directors. I'm on the resolution committee for the VSBA Board of Directors, so I'll be part of the team that's going through them. We had, in the executive committee meeting last week, we just had a sidebar conversation, and it was related to what you saw in the CULT report. There could be a possible place for a VSBA resolution, and I'm thinking, let's see, where is it? Page in the CULT report on the second page, executive committee meeting summary, there's a topic related to school choice waiver. So a possible resolution that might come from our board would be advocating with the legislature to adjust the policy in such a way to give leverage to superintendents, a few more slots or whatever, but to give superintendents a bit more discretion in how they use that lottery system for placement within the district. And it might be something, and I'm not going to tell individual stories. I don't think that's relevant at this point. But it, just giving superintendents a bit more discretion with saving a few slots so that they can use it for themselves, or based on the judgment of their professionals in the district. And so I would pause for two things. One, any questions about the resolution process? And then the second, I probably shouldn't have gone into the topic yet, but let me just ask, are there any questions related to the process? The VSBA resolution process? Not seeing any. And so one possible resolution might be related to this waiver for the lottery system or superintendent discretion, whatever. And what we would do is a team of us could draft something, bring it back to the full board, and the full board says yay or nay. If the board says yes, let's advance this, then it comes from the board to the VSBA for consideration as a resolution. I would say that that's one. And then if there are any other ideas that board members have, if you want to stew on it a little bit and offer suggestions, I'm happy to hear that. And Lynn, I would ask that you help us, help our board charge a committee to draft the resolution. I don't see more than, could be more than one, but 2, 3, 4, whoever's interested. And we could do it completely online. There's no need to meet, emails back and forth.
What's the deadline by when we have to get the resolution in by if we were going to do it?
We need to do that in the next couple of months. So if it's going to happen, what we should do is say that charge a committee to do that before the next board meeting. Then at that board meeting, review of whatever the resolution proposals are, board members can weigh in on it, maybe ask for some changes or reject it and say, no, we don't want to do it, or say, yes, let's advance it.
Okay, and then approve it at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think we could do it yeah. Well, I need to check on the timing, but it comes up pretty fast. Things are off a little bit right now, but it's like May and June is when these happen.
Okay. Elaine?
So this is absolutely board work. So I'm just throwing this out there for your consideration. So one of the things, Colleen, that you said, one of the ways we could address this, the resolution could relate to siphoning off some of our public school choice students, right? And saying that we reserve those for our own students, kids who were in our system and didn't get selected in the school choice thing. Another way to do it would be to have the resolution not be about public school choice and just frame it around. We all know that the best thing for a student is to stay within the system that the student is currently in. Like there are some really negative impacts on students when they move from school to school to school. We know that. And so the resolution might be, if you're a high school student and your family moves, you can stay and complete your high school career in the school that you're in, and the money stays with the kid. And I know that's not exactly the right word, so you'd have to kind of figure that out. But to just consider that as one of the options, that's the cleanest option. That doesn't then.
Yeah. So, and that's where, drafting something, actually
Right.
getting it in writing, and the way it works best with the VSBA is if it can really address something specific related to policy. But I think there are two ways,
right,
multiple ways to
I just
skin a
wanted to make
cat,
sure
as
you
the
had that
saying
second
goes.
way.
Yeah.
Well, I think, and I don't know, I'm turning to you, Megan Roy, but I'm thinking that when we talked about this at the legislative breakfast, they were talking about it in the context of the bill with that was being proposed for kids who were homeless and were being moved and trying to. So it would be, if we did write something, it would be along similar lines as something that's already being proposed.
Yeah. So, I mean, and if I could offer, I think if we get going down the path of trying to draft it right now, it's a whole lot of time. And so I would just offer, if there are people that are interested in this topic, if you'd like to join me in drafting something that we can bring back to the full board, I would welcome that. There are other people that are in the state that are working on something similar. Elaine knows of somebody that, another super or something that's been working on this. So I would, we know what the goal is. And so if you could, instead of us trying to figure it out right now, this is where that idea of a small committee is really effective. If I could just offer that.
Colleen, I would just add the language we were talking about is school stability. So for what that's worth, I think that's what makes it similar to homeless law, is it's about keeping school stability.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Ray, you've got your hand up. You have a question? Hold on. Ray doesn't have any audio.
Could he type out his question?
Ray, if you can hear this, can you type your question in the group chat? I don't see a microphone next to your name. That means that he's not connected by audio, correct? All right. Well, I'm waiting for him to type it out. Jocelyn.
I just want to say, Colleen, I'd be very interested on being on a committee with you. Thank you.
Why don't we, if you're interested in doing this, why don't you send your name to Colleen? Colleen, if you would take the helm on this one, since you know the process and you're going to be shepherding these through, unless
Yeah,
it's a
and if
conflict.
I could just ask that we model good board behavior and ask to be charged the full board with a draft resolution or two.
Yes.
Charge a committee, subcommittee, currently Colleen, Jocelyn, and others who want to volunteer, who will contact Colleen, and we will come back to the full board with a draft resolution or two.
Meeting. Is everyone in agreement with that? Okay.
And if it's okay, I'll send an email to the board. So if anyone has any other ideas, they'll have an opportunity to just throw something out there. Is that okay?
That sounds great.
Okay, thank you.
Colleen, can I ask one question about the process?
Yes.
Like how it works with the VSBA. Do they accept all resolutions that are proposed by boards?
So what they'll do is the resolution committee this summer will take all the resolutions that come in, and the committee will massage the language to put it into the appropriate legal speak, which Mark would be very familiar with. And then the board, the VSBA board of directors, will vote on endorsing or not endorsing the various resolutions. So when you see it in October, you will see that the VSBA board of directors is advocating for approving a resolution or not approving.
Right.
And
And
then
the only chance a board would have to plead their case is in their drafting of the resolution.
That's correct.
Well, but at the VSBA meeting, we can plead our case as well in the fall.
Well, once a resolution is drafted and it's gone to the committee, it's the committee's language. And then at the VSBA annual meeting, you can stand up and advocate for, but you will, either be going with the VSBA board of directors or against the VSBA board of directors. You can, and that happens. I've stood up and pleaded for something that I knew nobody else was going to approve of, and it's a good opportunity just to advance a discussion about a topic. I mean, sometimes you do that just to get people thinking about something. So, so yes, I mean, board members can plead for a position, but the resolution committee will have hold of all of the resolutions this summer.
Okay. Anything else on the resolution? All right, so we'll look for more details on that in our May meeting.
I will send an email to the board members, just reminding them of the process, the topic, and inviting any other ideas for other resolutions. And Jocelyn, thank you for being willing to do this.
Okay, 5.3, joint fiscal office presentation. And then there's actually a little addition to that in the CVS budget work associated with that. This really is an update to an update, because by the time this agenda came out, there was already a new update to the joint fiscal office work. And I think it will come as no surprise to anyone, especially given the news, that we're going to face a tough road for the near future. And while this is kind of new to the CVSD board as a whole, we've never had to cut budgets, we've never had to reduce spending in a significant manner. It's not new to our administrators. They've been through challenges for change and the recession and a lot of tough times. So this isn't to get into the details of how we're going to approach the budget. It's really a way for Jean just to kind of give an update on what the current fiscal outlook is for 7/11 on the 28th of April. And then kind of to Colleen's point, for the board to acknowledge whose work that really is and how that process will go forward. So Jean, there you are. If you could give us an update, the latest update.
Well, I've been listening to a lot of the Senate finance meetings recently, trying to keep on top of all. When I gave you an update a couple weeks ago, they were out looking a $39 million hole in the ed fund for the end of FY20. The good news is they've changed that to only 19 based on a change in their model. So a hole of $19 million in the ed fund at the end of FY20. Going forward, though, it doesn't help a whole lot, believe it or not. 20 million isn't really a drop in the bucket, because that is just that just encompasses the loss of basically sales tax or consumption taxes for FY20. No one expects this to be magically solved on July 1st, and so it's 100. So let's step back. So just as a reminder, they were out looking about an $80 million loss in consumption taxes, sales and use kind of taxes that go into the ed fund. They've lowered that to 60 for this kind of 3-month period. And when you've eaten up all the reserves they have, it leaves about a $19 million hole this year. They're now forecasting an additional $100 million or more loss in those taxes for FY21. And in addition, all the budgets that we passed on town meeting day added about $73 million of spending. So they're looking at, when the Economist and the JFO, Joint Fiscal Office, puts it all together, they're looking about at least $150 million shortfall in the ed fund for FY21. That assumes that everyone pays their property taxes. It also assumes that everybody catches up with that we've only lost about $60 million in the consumption taxes. So $150 million. If people can't pay their property taxes next year, that number gets a lot bigger. So that's a huge number. $150 million on about a $1.7 billion ed fund is about 7%. It's almost 9%. That would mean if you wanted to solve that problem with spending, that would be a $9 million cut to everyone's, a 9% cut to everyone's budget. From what I can gather, very few people are thinking that we're going to save our way out of this hole. For one thing, there's an understanding that schools are primarily people, salaries. It doesn't really help the state if we don't pay people. That's why we're paying everybody, whether they're working or not right now. It's stabilization for the economy. They also understand very well that, well, not contracts, but letters of intent are out there. We don't have a contract for next year, but we do. But the people who we want to come back next year are getting their letters of intent or have them in their hands. Nod your head, right, Mark? So the ability to save money for FY21 is either very small or associated with the negotiations for salary for next year. There's also, I believe, a very strong understanding from both Senate Ed, Senate Finance, and House Ed that public schools are probably one of the top 3 institutions holding the community together right now, right? We're providing education, we're providing food, we're providing childcare, we're providing salaries to huge amounts of people. Anything that would cause that to weaken or shake, they understand the danger to the greater economy of us not being able to function effectively. So it's a tight rope that they're walking. So FY21, we have a budget. It was voted, it was approved in March. The legislature, I'm a little unclear on this part. I would need clarification. I've heard 2 things. One is that by statute, the state has to give us the revenue for the budget that's passed. I also, even though I haven't been in this job very long, remember the clawback a couple of years back where they shorted us on revenue. So I think that that's a tool in their toolkit. And given the amount of the problem, I really have no idea what, if anything, how big that number is going to be. That they would perhaps try to claw back the amount of money that we're going to get from the CARES Act, which we think is going to be about $600,000 or $700,000. But that money is coming to us because of costs that we are going to incur because of COVID. So they might use that, but it's not logical. But they might decide that that's a number that they could, we should figure out how to deal with our COVID expenses. They could claw that back. Any number above that is total speculation because a 9% cut on our budget would be $7 million, and there's no way to execute a $7 million cut. So somewhere between 700,000 and 7 million, I have no idea, and I don't think anybody in the legislature right now has any idea. Then FY22, as I told you a couple weeks ago, just gets complicated because that's the budget we're going to be putting together in the fall. Probably in the midst of this, hopefully better than what we're living through right now, but not all better, right? And so people are going to still be out of work. There's going to have to be some kind of tax implications they haven't set the yield yet officially. The legislature has to set the yield for property taxes for next year. They haven't done that yet. It's not going to be down, so it will be up. So I think that there's going to be a lot of pressure on the FY22 budget, only sort of exacerbated. Thank you. By the fact that we may have to dip into our fund balance for shortfalls this year and next. So this year we're going to see a hurt in the revenue field. I don't think expenses. I think the expenses, pluses, minuses on the expenses for FY20 are going to be fine. Our revenue in food service is going to come up short. Next year, it's a big question mark as to how much of the problem the legislature is going to try to solve by clawing back some of the money that they owe us that we would have to figure out how to deal with. And then FY22, the big problem is going to be putting together a budget next year in the middle of a crisis when the community is hurting. Just the only other thing I wanted to add as sort of an update, because you've heard some of that before. Bill Talbot. Those who've been on the board for a while may recognize that name. He was the AOE's CFO not that long ago. He retired. He's come back and he's working for the Joint Fiscal Office. He's very well respected. I think he actually, Elaine said he used to be a legislator, so they know him well. And he spoke to the Senate Finance Committee, and he said, look, it's pretty simple. There's 3 ways you can do it. 3 ways to solve this problem. You can reduce your spending. You can find some tax base that we haven't touched yet, which everyone kind of laughed at that. What isn't already being taxed?
Marijuana.
That did come up. You can, federal money. We haven't really talked about that yet. There is a lot of speculation, or at least a lot of advocacy for states to get federal money to plug revenue holes. We're not allowed to do that with the CARES money, but going forward, there's an understanding that states, we're clearly not in this all by ourselves. Many states are much more dependent on tax revenue, consumption tax revenue than Vermont is. So there's federal money could come and help us bail out, or you can borrow. And that's sort of the one that got some more interest from the committee. So we're talking about a $150 million hole. The state could borrow some or all of the $150 million hole and sort of flatten the impact until the economy rebounds. So again, I guess what I'm saying is that there are options beyond trying to save our way out of a $150 million hole. But as of Friday, Lynn, is that when the meeting was? Thursday, Friday?
Friday.
There's
Thursday.
There's still a lot of discussion at the state level as to how to solve this problem.
Russ, you had your hand up.
Jean, what do you project the fund balance to be at the end of June?
I should have that. I think it's 2 million, but I should get that number back to you. And actually, I have to be clear on one thing. I do not know how to forecast this year. I know that I exactly, I've got a hold on spending. I think we got a pretty good feel. Spending is going to be. I'm waiting to get April as a month just to see how things are running in April, and then I'll have a better idea of projecting. There are some leadership is asking if I can release spending to them, and I'm trying to work on that to see how to, so they can continue to operate. And so we're not shortchanging anything that kids need to learn, but there are some maybe perhaps optional, I would consider optional things they would like back. So I don't know how to project this year, but I could, in a few minutes, I could look and tell you how much we had.
Sure. I mean, it's a long way from 9% of our budget. Whether it reduces us to, if you've spent all of it next year, whether it reduces us to, a $5 million hole or a 4 or a 6 doesn't really much matter. We're still with a multi-million-dollar hole that if, something doesn't come through to plug that, either state or federal money, that's an awfully big hole.
Yeah, I would just hesitate that anybody thinks that anybody's planning on us making up a 9% gap.
No, I don't either. But it's only going to get us so far. The fund balance.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Angela, and then Jocelyn. Sorry.
I was wondering, Jean, if you mentioned the borrowing option. I heard it was one of those press conference last week. I think it was Dan French, someone saying like, well, borrowing is an option. Right now, we're not sure at which level the borrowing should be done, whether it would be state or district. I was wondering if there's been any further conversation about that if borrowing as a district is something we would ever want to consider, or even if we'll get to that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because the way it works is that the towns collect the education tax money and send it to the state, and the state returns it to us. They have taxing authorization. So right now the conversation seems to be, so the towns must deliver the money to the ed fund. They can waive their own property taxes for their own, their own purposes, but they are on the hook to deliver the education fund money to the ed fund. If they can't raise it because their people can't pay their taxes, then technically the towns should be borrowing the money to make the ed fund whole for property taxes. That's all kind of all the discussion that was going on for a while. Because even if they provide all the property taxes, there's still a $150 million hole. And at that point, it becomes a question of the state borrowing. I haven't really heard any serious discussion about school districts having to borrow. It's gone back and forth. It's possible, just like we borrow all the time. It's TAN, tax anticipation note, right? We have TAN money all the time. We could, but I haven't heard too much about asking districts to do that. It would hurt smaller districts a lot more than it would hurt us.
Right. Okay. And then I'm just also curious what, if you have a sense of what the bulk of our spending has been, our COVID spending.
So far, it's been very little. We spent it on, some hardware, IT hardware, some software supports. Our biggest outflow that we're looking at right now, our biggest liability, I guess, is the compensatory special ed services this summer to make up for services that children are not able to receive now. So we've got a pretty big number penciled in for that. And then the next bigger ones have to do with all of the hard work Jeff is doing about what school's going to look like next year.
Right.
Do I need more bus drivers? Do I need, because they're have multiple routes? Do we have to do things with food service? I mean, there's a lot of open questions. Do I need more janitors, right? There's a lot of those kind of questions that I'm worried about for the fall.
Thanks.
Jocelyn?
Question was my question. Thank you.
She's frozen.
No, she said that was her question.
Oh, that was her question. Okay, sorry. She's still frozen.
No, she's on my screen.
Okay, so you're all set. Okay, good. Thank you. So clearly this is a to be continued type of story. And I suspect as we start getting into our committee meetings starting up next, be taking a really closer look with Jean on the levers that are affecting FY21 and FY22, and we'll be able to come back to the board as we start needing to make, as we start looking at the budget and kind of letting us know what that process will look like. Any other thoughts or questions? I got to tell you, it's kind of neat to have all these committees on YouTube and be able to, be part of it. It's something that in the past you would have to go down to Montpelier for. So yeah, if you're ever bored or if you ever want your kids to fall asleep, just turn on Senate Finance or House Ways and Means and learn a lot.
And Megan Roy is on there like every other week.
She is.
Yeah.
All the Act 173 testimony.
Right. She's there all the time.
Okay, 5.4, Teacher Appreciation Week is May 4th. And I'm hoping everyone has lots of great ideas. In the past, we have provided, we do this for all the different groups at school, whether it be the teachers, the custodians, the food service workers, whenever it's their week, we provide coffee, donuts, bagels at each school in the morning. And clearly this year, that's not going to work. So I don't think I have to, it goes without saying that I think our teachers are definitely in need of recognition and appreciation. So I would love if anyone has some ideas about what we can do to celebrate how many teachers? 400, 500 teachers? That's a lot of cookies to bake. We could start now. But we have a lot of teachers that I really would like the board to appreciate and recognize. So if anyone has some great ideas, I'm open to them. Please email me thoughts, your kids. I don't even know what Jocelyn, what are the PTOs doing anything?
I don't know if you can hear me. My internet is getting really crackly and slow. So I don't know if you can hear anything I'm saying right now.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything from the Williston FAP. This happened and we've had no communication whatsoever about anything since our last meeting, which was probably in, maybe it was the second week of March.
Okay.
Aaron posted an idea.
I saw that from Aaron, a full page ad in the papers. That would be great. Any other thoughts? So you might want to run on this, go for a long walk, have a drink, something. But for sure, I think we all want it. But everybody's internet is bad tonight. It's tired. It wants to go on spring break. And include everyone, the teachers' names in the ad. That's a great idea. Okay. Dare I put out a Google Doc? What, Jocelyn?
Sorry, I feel like I'm moving in slow motion. If we have the money and we're going to spend the money on some kind of coffee or some kind of gift cards, I would just suggest that we look at getting gift cards at locally owned businesses. If that was the route that we could go down, just as a, two birds, one stone, thank our teachers, but also support some of the local businesses in our towns.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so if you have an idea, maybe just email me by the end of the week. I'll put out an email. Maybe Colleen and I need to put together a school board newsletter going out with all the reminders from this meeting. But if you have some ideas, to let me know by the end of the week. And I will let you know what we all come up with. Okay, 6.0 action matters. 6.1, appoint 2 board members to the hiring committee for the equity position. I just unmuted everybody because.
Move.
And I need a second.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, so Ray moved and Kelly seconded. Discussion. Elaine, do you want
to? So here's where we are. Colt had a long conversation about this position because we know every single position that is a new position in particular, but every position, we're really having serious conversations about, do we want to follow through with these new positions? So that includes a couple that are in the board consent agenda tonight that, have had many conversations with the administrators involved. And in our mind, when we're doing this, what we're thinking about is, what do we want to be like on the other side of this? What's the system that we want to remain standing as we are moving into a new way of doing business? And for Colt anyways, we felt like this was a position that, even knowing that it could look radically different in another year, that for this year, it would be a position that we would want to include. And so I brought that up at the executive committee just to have a bigger conversation about the new positions. And so we had already posted the position. We have candidates. I think we have 6 or 7 candidates. Quite a few of those are very viable candidates. So we are poised to move forward with an interview committee, with a timeline, with support from Rebecca Haslam. She would co-facilitate with us, so to make sure that we have that kind of perspective. So we're ready to move. at the point that the board appoints 2 members to this committee.
So in the past, the board usually is only involved on hiring committees for principals, superintendent, and we did have representation on the position that Bonnie currently fills. So this is, this doesn't happen all the time. But I think it just goes to the strength that the board has expressed, and the importance of this position within our district. I'm sorry, Elaine, go ahead.
Well, I would also add to that it also involves some board training, right?
Yep.
The board's going to be involved in it in a really,
Yeah. Brendan, you had a question?
Yeah, Lynn, sorry, I didn't catch this in the beginning of the meeting, but I thought we were going to take all these positions out of consent agenda today, so we can talk about that.
We are, and I did. They're at the end of the action matters. We're on right now the section looking to appoint 2 board members to the hiring committee for the equity. We haven't hired anyone for that position yet, so we're looking.
Something I thought I heard, so I apologize.
That's okay. Elaine, do you have a general sense of time commitment and time
Yes.
frame?
Yeah, so what we're looking at is next Friday, we would have a training. So not this coming Friday, but Friday the, let me see, May 8th. Friday, May 8th, we would have a training, probably a 2-hour training that would include Rebecca Haslam, our Jeff, Megan, and myself, and Mark, and the committee. We would then do some online, Rebecca would develop the questions based on input she had gotten from the committee. And then we would do interviews Tuesday, May 12th in the afternoon and Friday, May 15th in the afternoon. That's the plan right now. Could be we'll need more time than that, but those are the dates that we've scheduled right at this point.
So are there any board members? Jocelyn, do you have a question? Jocelyn, do you want to write?
Sorry, I'm having huge issues. I can see everyone else moving, but it looks like I'm frozen. I just wanted to put out there, I'd love to be on this committee / whatever we're calling it, but I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not yet.
Well, you just want to type it. If you can type in chat, maybe that would be easier. Are there board members that are interested? I hear Jocelyn is interested. Is there another board member or board members that are interested? I love this thumbs up. How did you get that, Barbara? I don't have a thumbs up icon on my Zoom meeting.
It's in reactions.
I don't know how to raise my hand, so but that's all I know. Seriously, I can't find this raised hand.
It's anyway.
Do you have a question or or was that volunteering to be on the committee?
That was a volunteer.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. And Ray?
Erin says she's interested too.
Okay, thank you. Ray, did you have a question or were you interested as well?
I was just volunteering.
Okay. Ray, Jocelyn, Erin, and Barbara. Okay, 4 people. I don't think we need 4 people. We need 2 people. So,
You got plenty. I'll withdraw.
okay, thanks, Ray. Anyone else? Jocelyn, Erin, Barbara? Any other we only need 2 if there's anyone willing to, or am I going to draw names out of a hat? Yeah, there's not a lottery button on here. Barbara says she's withdrawing. Okay, so then Erin and Jocelyn will serve as the board members to the hiring committee for the equity position.
So
Thank
we'll send out information about the specific times, training, and all of that, and who the other committee members are. And just for the board's information, the rest of the committee will be composed of 1 principal, 1 English language learner teacher, Jeff, Megan, and I, 2 teachers, 1 high school, 1 K-8, and 1 student and 1 support staff member.
It's a good committee. It's a big committee. Thank you. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to seeing the results. Okay, 6.2 CVS D School Calendar 2021. Do I have a motion to, hold on. Do I have a motion to approve the CVS D School Calendar for 2021?
Move.
That's right. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Jeff. Discussion. I believe this request to pull the calendar out came from wanting to know, given the need for next year and the best ways to address that, is there any way to impact the calendar for next year? So that's why it came out of consent to discussion. And Elaine, can you just?
Well, I just want to frame what the calendar by statute is: a regional calendar voted on up or down vote by the regional superintendents by April 1st. So that calendar, the 175 student days, as silly as it might sound right now, cannot change absent a statutory change or a vote of the regional superintendents. I think for those 175 days, we haven't had this conversation, but I'm thinking none of us thinks we know enough right now to know what the change would be. So we're just moving forward. The discretionary days are the additional days. So those are the teacher professional development days and the parent teacher conference days. I'm just kind of scoping out what you can have a conversation about.
So by statute, the regional superintendents could go back at some point though and change the calendar with guidance from the AOE or something, or?
Yes, so by statute, if they said, okay, you don't need 175 days, or they know you've already done and submitted your calendars, because those were submitted to the agency, and we are now waiving that and saying you can reopen the calendars now that we have this new guidance that says X, Y, Z, and that's the part that, it's not there yet. So it could be that it would be a conversation down the road. I just don't know for sure for the 175 days. There's nothing the board doesn't have the authority to vote differently on those days.
Okay. Are there any other questions about the calendar? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. CVS D School Calendar 2021 is approved. Personnel. There are a lot of them. And I'm wondering if the best way to do this Brendan, is your concern specifically the new positions or the and understanding versus the new hires?
Yeah,
the new people in the existing positions?
Yeah, I think with the placement position, would be your new hires, those are ones that we have to have to keep the the school districts running. We need to have teachers in classrooms, we need to have janitors. My concern is knowing that we're going to have, a budget shortfall next year. Do we really want to add, 260,000 additional and back into that budget? So, I'd like to talk about each one of these positions, or maybe hear from administration. This, as a board member, as a board, we're not going to vote on those positions, but I need some type of confidence that we're looking at every single one of these, knowing that we're going into a budget deficit.
Yes. Can I speak to that?
Yes.
So I've started having my meetings with individual principal groups. 2 weeks ago, I started that. And at every single meeting, that was the main topic, one of the main topics. Who are you in the interview process with? Who have you already offered positions to? And before you recommend a position, have you considered that I could be coming back to you in short order and saying, we need to find X amount of dollars out of your system. So for every position that you're putting forward, just know that you may need to come up with that same amount of money or even more. And so in some cases, I know Greg is not on anymore. He was on for a whole long time, but he left. But I had 3 conversations, long conversations with Greg about a particular position that isn't in the packet tonight. Not because he has finally decided for sure that he's not going to put it in there, but because they are giving that kind of serious consideration to any hire. So the positions that you're seeing that are new positions, I've had that conversation. Adam's on, he will say to you, I've had the conversation more than once with him about it. And the executive committee will tell you that I've said, in the end, it's kind of what I said at the beginning. We are looking to put together a team that we know will serve us well when we come out of this. So Adam has a couple positions. I'd rather, I'm going to let him talk in a second here and I'll stop talking, but I know from talking to him, he has tremendous sense of this is such an opportunity for CVU, these new positions. And so to not fill them would be like, just kind of like taking a pass on being great, right? And with full knowledge that, and might very well be coming back to him in short order and saying, hey, CVU, this is your part of this amount of money that we're looking for. And so as superintendent, I would much rather that the board would say to us, hey, Colt, hey, lead, you need to find X amount of dollars in that budget. And that's charge us with that. And then let us make the decisions about, where we want to find that money, instead of saying, no, we don't want to approve new positions. Adam, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to jump in. First of all, it's great to see everyone. It was especially great to see Kate and Elise. Miss you all a lot, and happy to see your faces. Yeah, the two, I think really what we're talking about would be the lead counselor and the house director positions that are there. Those are really the 2 new ones. Those weren't, I wouldn't put them, I certainly don't want to correct Elaine, because I agree with her. I think it's a step to us being great, but I also think it's about need. And those positions weren't put out there out of convenience. It was really out of our student population and a shift to our model. Again, you can look around the state. You're not going to find too many schools without directors of guidance, particularly schools that are big, and we're the biggest, obviously. And we don't have a director, we have a lead counselor to help us out. So in a lot of ways, I think the positions that we put forward for this budget are economical, and I think the ways we're choosing to fill them are economical as well. So I don't know how much detail to go into there, Elaine, but I think that we've also put offers out to some really great people that we're excited about. So I don't know that I need to add much more.
Brendan?
Thank you guys both. So, yeah, I can't agree with you guys more that these positions are important. And, you know, Adam, the two positions that you talked about are probably something that needs to happen this year. So I'm not asking that we don't hire people. You know, I was on the finance committee where we talked about all these positions, and I truly believe that we need them. My thought process is that are we in a position to delay any of those positions for 1 year until we can understand what type of environment we're going to be working in?
I couldn't hear everything, but was the question, can we hire them on a 1-year contract?
No,
No,
he's saying, can we delay it?
Yeah, we potentially, I know I'll just summarize what I said real quick. I know all these positions are important. I'm not questioning that. You know, and the Adams 2 positions are in that role is probably something that we want to fill this year. But is every position that we're filling this year something that we want to fill, or do we want to wait 1 year and then until we learn what our new environment's going to be? Because it's people we're messing with, right? So if we hire, you know, person X into a new position, newly created position, and we have to cut, you know, a certain amount of money, you know, they work for 6 months and then we have to let them go, or 1 school year. Like, how does that work? You know, it just seems irresponsible to go out and hire all these people right now.
Well, the bulk of these people are replacements for people who are already in these positions.
And
I
those
mean, I'm
hired for, yes. I'm specifically talking about net new positions.
right. So I think that in this list, the net new positions are the director of guidance and the house director.
Yeah.
Weigh in with a little good news. Because of the shutdown, there's a fair amount of grant money that was dedicated to the rest of this year that won't be spent, that can carry forward to next year. The restrictions around that, and we're looking at ways to use those resources to support some Title I, Title II positions that could ease that burden. So back to Elaine's point about finding offsets, I'm pretty confident we might get close to offsetting the number of added positions with these offsets due to the grant surplus.
That'd be great. Right. Ray, you have a question?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. I saw your blue hand.
Oh, no, shouldn't be, but
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, so just so everyone is Russ, go ahead.
I had a blue hand.
Oh, maybe it's your blue hand. I'm sorry.
So the HR committee, along with Mark and Elaine, had a conversation the other day with Pietro Lynn, who has been our legal representative in negotiations. And we're going to talk more to that when we get to executive session. But one of the things that, you know, we talk contractually, we are past the point where we can really do RIFs that would have any sort of significant financial impact on, you know, on how many employees we have next year. Beyond that, we would be, let's say, trotting out some untried legal theories or legal principles. If we were to say, okay, we're short $3 million based on what the state is giving us or the federal government or whatever, and we need to reduce staff significantly. So I just put that out there to, you know, for people to keep in mind as we're talking about filling these positions. Thank you.
So, Elaine, just to clarify one more time, with the exception of the one of the house director positions at CVU and the school counselor position, all of these other positions are existing positions or positions that we need to hire because of our student support needs, special education needs?
Yes.
I think Megan was going to
Thanks,
say the
Lynn.
exact same thing I was just going to say.
Yes.
There is only one
SLP.
of the special ed positions is new. The rest are restructuring existing staff or resignations. The intensive needs position at the high school is new, but is a direct result of the number of kids coming into CVU with intensive needs. So,
Okay. Are there any other, I know I'm doing this backwards, but I'm trying to condense the process a little bit. Is there any other discussion or input on the multiple personnel hires that we've pulled out of the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Is there a motion to approve the personnel as listed on our April 28th agenda under the consent agenda? Colleen, did you move? No. Did someone?
Jocelyn so moved.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Do I have 7.0 consent agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move.
Ray moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Jocelyn second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. 8.0, next meeting dates. We do have our next committee meetings on May 5th at 6 o'clock. I'm guessing you'll get a Zoom invite from the chair of your committees, respective committees, to set those up. And then we'll have our regular board meeting on May 19th. Stay tuned for some potential doodle polls as to when we can do the topics for our retreat in between then. If there's not anything else, I'm gonna ask for a motion to go into executive session. I'll end this meeting and then we can start up the next meeting for starting with negotiations actually first, and then we'll go to superintendent eval. So actually, Aaron and Brendan, I'm going to keep you in the waiting room, or I can also text you when we're done with negotiations, if that works for you, to let you know when it's time to come back. Brendan?
Could we do the superintendent eval first?
I'm sorry?
Could we do the superintendent eval first?
Well, the only I've got Elaine and Mark are needed for for negotiations. So I was going to do them first, just so that they could leave. It doesn't
matter to me. You could text me later. That's fine.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to need long talking about negotiations.
Okay.
Okay.
But whatever.
Yeah, put me in the waiting room.
I'll put you in the waiting room.
Thank
Such
you,
power.
Brendan.
Aaron, are you there? No, text her when she's ready to join. Okay, so we're all set with that.
Lynn,
So
can I ask us?
yes.
Can I ask a silly logistics question about the committee meetings? Do all the chairs have Zoom accounts? Because
that's a good question.
You're limited to 40 minutes.
You can set it up. The district can set it up and assign another host. You're fine.
If you use your CVSD account, I think that you're already considered an educational institution and there's no limit.
That's true.
I signed up for it and they told me I could do more than 40 minutes.
Great. Okay. All right. So do I have a motion to enter executive session at 8 o'clock?
Move.
And so I had a move by Ray and a second by Angela. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Thanks, everyone.